If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, comment, and subscribe to my YouTube channel, as well as follow me and subscribe to me on all my other social media platforms. What's up, Thrashers, and welcome back once again to the Thrash Maniac 99 YouTube channel, and I am back with another CD collection update for you guys. So I teased another update in the last one, as I already had this stack pretty much made. I just was trying to buy a little bit of time in between updates because I'm actually currently working on another stack for the next update. Because, well, I don't stop buying. And why the hell should I? But that's neither here nor there. So yeah, it's another update. I got another pretty decent stack right here. I got a mix of old albums as well as some new albums, a few albums from 2023 that I needed to pick up, and some kind of unexpected surprises in this stack in particular. So without further ado, let's get started, as we're going to start off with a pair from the same band. We have ourselves a pair from Enforced. We have the debut album At the Walls and their latest album War Remains. So yeah, Enforced, everybody out there should know about this band. After all, they're one of the premier upcoming thrash metal bands out there. Some people call them crossover thrash, which might be a bit accurate, but I say they're far more just visceral, brutal, aggressive, classic thrash. The only thing I think that makes them punk is the vocal approach, but other than that, musically, I think they're just straight up classic thrash. Yeah, definitely At the Walls, I would say, is probably the most crossover of the entire Enforced catalog, as, yeah, there's a little bit more of a hardcore punk fury going on with this album, whereas with War Remains, I've already talked about it in an album review earlier this year, and I still think it's maybe the best thrash album of 2023 so far. I don't know, there's a lot of competition so far for best thrash album of 2023. So far this year has been a pretty solid year for thrash, but we still got, after this month, we still have 5 months left to go. So anything can happen. But yeah, Enforced, if you haven't checked them out already, please check them out. There's also the second album, Kill Grid, so I would just suggest checking out all 3 of their albums. But yeah, At the Walls and War Remains. Alright, so next up we have Entombed AD, Bowels of Earth. This is the final Entombed AD album that's ever going to be released because, well, sadly, we lost LG Petrov 2 years ago to bile duct cancer. But this album came out in 2019. I want to say I reviewed this one. If not, that was a huge oversight on my part. But I want to say I did review this one when it came out. But I did talk about it quite a bit during my Entombed album rankings. And yes, I included the Entombed AD albums, considering they were the only version of Entombed putting out music for a while. But yeah, this was the last one. Came out in 2019. And this is just some awesome old school Swedish death metal. Not so much the death and roll that some people had become accustomed to with Entombed during the mid-90s to the mid-2000s. This is just mostly straight up death metal. But yeah, like Torment Remains, Elimination, the title track, those just scream classic Entombed. But yeah, Bowels of Earth, and rest in peace, LG. Alright, so now we move on to some kind of unexpected albums that I got in recent times. First, God Dethroned, the Grand Grimoire. This came out in 1997 on Metal Blade Records, and of course, God Dethroned has always been a band that's kind of escaped me when it comes down to blackened death metal, because blackened death metal I'm kind of iffy about, because you got 2 sides of the genre. You got the side where it's basically death metal with blackened elements, and then you have the so-called war metal bands that mash together blackened death metal, kind of like Blasphemy, Archgoat, Beherit, Impiety, those kind of bands, and I'm not as into the whole war metal thing. I prefer blackened death metal to be just death metal with blackened atmosphere. This is more or less just a hybrid of blackened death metal, not so much blackened to death, but you could still call it blackened death because it's pretty much a good descriptor. But this is not like war metal hybrid of blackened death metal. This is just like taking influence from the bigger bands of black metal like Emperor and mashing it with the bigger bands of death metal like Morbid Angel. Sorry about that, some technical difficulties there, but as I was saying, so yeah, God Dethroned basically just takes the best of black metal and the best of death metal. And this album, I haven't listened to it yet, but from what I've heard, this is one of their best albums. I definitely need to dig deeper into God Dethroned, and I would say perhaps this might be a good start. So, there you go. As I need to do some arranging real quick before we move on. So now to the next album, we have Green Carnation, Light of Day, Day of Darkness. So this came out in 2001 on the End Records, Prophecy Productions. This is a Norwegian metal band that I talked a little bit about them in my Blood Red Throne album ranking video, where this was basically Chort, the original founding guitarist of Blood Red Throne, who was also in Emperor and Carpathian Forest and live with Satyricon. This is a project he formed at the tail end of the 80s, heading into the 90s, like 89, 1990. Started out as originally a death metal band, and then became more of a gothic progressive metal band. And this is definitely like gothic prog, because this is just one song that's an hour long. I haven't got to listen to it yet, but I have heard this is an amazing song / album with great texture and all the 9 yards of gothic / progressive metal. But yeah, definitely need to check this out, because this could be retro review material someday. Even though I haven't done too many retro reviews, this might be one. So be on the lookout for that in the future. But yeah, Green Carnation. Alright, and next up we have Hellhammer, Demon Entrails. So this is the compilation released by Century Media in 2008 of pretty much everything Hellhammer did, except for Apocalyptic Raids, which I do have. This is pretty much all of the demos that Hellhammer ever did in 1983, like Satanic Rites, Death Fiend, and Triumph of Death. All 3 of those demos wrapped up in here, and there are definitely like some songs that even I wasn't too familiar with when it came to Hellhammer, like Reaper. Well, actually no, Reaper I have heard, but like Decapitator, Crucifixion, Metallic Storm. But definitely there are songs on here I remember from Apocalyptic Raids, like Messiah, The Third of the Storms, Triumph of Death, Revelations of Doom. Where is it? I think that's it. No Horus Aggressor on here. But yeah, there are definitely some songs that I have heard from these demos, but not entirely. And then, of course, the original versions of songs that were on Apocalyptic Raids. But yeah, it's just cool to have everything that Hellhammer did before they became Celtic Frost. So yeah, Hellhammer rules. What more can you say? Alright, next up, and this was one I didn't expect to find out of nowhere, and that is Impaled, Death After Life. This is the 3rd album from this California-based death metal band. Basically, carcass worship is the best way to describe it, but not as raw as a band like Exhumed, who are also from the same area as Impaled. This, after all, features Ross Sewage, who is in Exhumed, but you also have, like, Sean McGrath, who is basically like a Jeff Walker sound-alike when it comes to vocals. But this album is basically a concept album all about experimenting in murder and pathology and surgery, all the medical craziness that you would be able to wrap your head around if you're a pathologist or anything. But yeah, it's like all these songs are themed and they're connected pretty well. Granted, I first heard of this band courtesy of their album prior, Mondo Metallica, which, good luck trying to find a cheap, good copy of that album. I'm gonna need all the help I can get to find that. But I got this pretty cheap. I think I got it for under $10 off of a guy from Instagram who sells stuff. And this was one of those that came in that big bundle I bought. But yeah, this album, it's raw, it's nasty. I would almost describe this as gory melodic death metal, because there's a lot of melodeath touches on here, especially in the song Gutless. That almost feels like what would happen if At the Gates and Carcass had a baby. It would be in that song Gutless, because it opens up very similar to At the Gates. But yeah, it's heavy but super melodic, so yeah, that's why I would maybe describe this as just a gore-infested melodeath album. But yeah, this album rules. I need to get more Impaled if I can find them cheap, because for some odd reason they're expensive. But yeah, Death After Life. Alright, now we're going to get into a couple of ones I got from this year, and I'll just go through them quick. But first, we got Metallica, 72 Seasons. Yes, I know, people are mixed about that album. I still like it. Deal with it. So I'm just going to keep it brief because I already did a review of this album. If you want to know my full opinion, go check out that video. I still think it's a good album. Doesn't quite hold up compared to the previous two, but it's still fun. But that's all I'm going to say about that. Again, if you want to know my full opinion, just go watch my review. And then we get to Mezzrow, Summon Thy Demons. This also came out in 2023, actually not long after 72 Seasons came out, and I was blown away when I heard this, and you can tell in the review I did. This was unexpected. Like, I saw these guys were a thrash band, but I wasn't expecting the level of thrash they were going to deliver. Very mirroring of the Bay Area scene, like Metallica, Testament, a little bit of Exodus, but even the final track kind of has some German thrash moments. Again, if you want to know my full opinion about this album, check out my review. This is another one that could be a candidate for Best Thrash Album of 2023. So yeah, Mezzrow, Summon Thy Demons. Alright, next up, how many? Next few also, well actually the next two came from that same bundle I talked about with Impaled. Misery Index, Retaliate. The debut album from this Maryland-based death grind band. Jason Netherton, formerly of Dying Fetus. And yeah, this is the very first thing they ever did. And already on Nuclear Blast, which goes to show you the buzz that this band has still to this day. After all, this is definitely much more raw, much more unhinged than like recent Misery Index, like the last two albums, I would say. This, I would say, has a little bit more of the grind aspect than straight-up death metal. After all, they do an awesome cover of Brutal Truth's Birth of Ignorance on here. But yeah, I still need to dig further into this album, as well as most of the other Misery Index catalog. I've only listened to the last two, and I thought Complete Control last year was a hell of an album. But yeah, Retaliate, Misery Index. And then the next one that came from that same bundle, we have Motorhead, Motorizer. 2008, this is of course in that modern lineup of Lemmy, Phil Campbell, and Mickey D. I remember I first heard of this album courtesy of the song Rock Out, because it was the excuse me, theme song to a WWE pay-per-view in 2008 called Unforgiven. And I thought this song kind of sounded like another Ace of Spades to some degree. I haven't checked out the rest of the album. I just remember the song Rock Out, and it's a short 2-minute barn burner of speed metal. But yeah, it's just nice to have some more Motorhead in my collection. But yeah, Motorizer. Next up, we have Nailed to Obscurity with Black Frost. This came out in 2019, and this is one I actually did review in 2019. Granted, back when I wasn't doing the best job at reviewing albums at the time, not in the approach that I do them now. But this was still a pretty damn good album for a melodic death doom band. This was some cool stuff. I remember there was a ton of hype around this album, and of course now it's kind of a mixed bag for a lot of people. I still think it's good. Again, if you want to know my full opinion on it and you want to sit through a shitty review, go check out that review if you can even find it. But yeah, nailed to Obscurity. Alright, now the next four are all from the same band, and that is, of course, the Obliviscaris. So I have Portal of Eye, Citadel, Urn, and Exul, the latest. So yeah, of course, I've been starting to kind of dig deeper into the Obliviscaris courtesy of the new album, which I still say this is a possible album of the year contender for me. But yeah, just in general, Obliviscaris might be one of the most talented bands I have ever heard, playing like their own brand of progressive death metal, essentially. Or most people would just call them extreme prog. I still think there's far more death metal than the whole black metal thing. Like, there's occasional black metal, but I would say this is mostly prog death metal glory. After all, a lot of these songs on these albums remind me of classic Opeth, as well as, like, I would say maybe a little bit of bands like Edge of Sanity, maybe a tad bit of Cynic, especially when it comes down to the bass work. But yeah, just Obliviscaris. If you have been sitting on these four albums and you're a prog fan, definitely worth listening. Check them out. Alright, next up, another one part of that Instagram bundle I bought. We have Nightwish, Oceanborn. This was 1998. This was during the early, closer to power metal than the symphonic power metal sound that they became known for around this point. But yeah, this is the Taria era, which I'm going to go ahead and say it right now. I'm thinking the Taria era has become underrated by a lot of people, because now when people think Nightwish, they think Floor Jansen, which I do enjoy Floor Jansen, but to me she's not Nightwish. Taria is Nightwish. And this was one of the early albums of that era. I still need to get, crap, I forget the name of the album that came out in 2004 that had the song Nemo. But yeah, Nightwish, I do have a lot of respect for it. May not be completely my bag, but there are definitely some gems within the old Nightwish discography. So yeah, Oceanborn. Next up, we get another one that came out this year in 2023, and that is Overkill, Scorched. Hell of an album from, this is the 20th studio album from the New Jersey thrash legends. Another case of, if you want to know my full opinion about it, go watch my review and you'll get my answer as to why this album's so damn good. But yeah, Overkill. Alright, next up we get an album that came out last year that I really enjoyed, and that actually, I think if I remember, I made the top 10 album of the year list for me, and that is Saor with Origins. This is amazing Scottish, atmospheric, black / folk / classic heavy metal, because there's a ton of folk on here, good amount of that atmospheric black metal, but a lot of Iron Maiden nods on this album, and I think that was one of the things that hooked me on this album, was those Iron Maiden influences. I just absolutely love them so much. But yeah, if you want to know my full opinion about it, again, I don't know if I did a full review of it or it was on an Under the Radar episode, but if you can look that episode up, check it out and you'll know my opinion about it. Alright, now we have a 3-pack. We're almost done. We have a triple threat from the one and only, just double checking, from the one and only Vomitory. We have Revelation Nausea, Blood Rapture, and Primal Massacre. So yeah, all three of these albums I got from, I think, the same, yeah, this is part of that Instagram bundle I got, and I saw these were dirt cheap and in great shape, so I was like, fuck it, I've been needing to get in the Vomitory, and I thought, what better way to get started than getting these three? So, yeah, Vomitory, of course, just badass Swedish death metal that doesn't sound like Swedish death metal. It sounds closer to Florida death metal, kind of like Cannibal Corpse, Vital Remains, but then there's also some like Vader and maybe a little bit of Bloodbath here and there on some of their work. I did review their last album, All Heads Are Gonna Roll, and that's an amazing album, which I need to get at some point. Thinking about for one of my next Amazon orders, just buying a bunch of albums that came out this year that I need to get in the collection. But yeah, good old Vomitory. And then the final album for this update, we have Witherscape, The Inheritance. The debut album from Dan Swano's last project, just proggy, mellow death, prog rock, arena rock, hybrid. Kind of like Edge of Sanity meets Nightingale is the best way to describe Witherscape. And of course, you know me, being the big Dan Swano fan that I am, I saw this was pretty cheap on Discogs. Granted, it all came separate, like the case was separate from the inserts and the back and the disc. But I did manage to fit it into a jewel case, which is really, really nice. But yeah, Witherscape, I have their second album, Northern Sanctuary, which was an amazing album. I need to get the new Tomorrow EP, but from what I've seen, that's going for a good amount of money. And then I'll have everything Witherscape has done. And Swano, I would love to hear another Witherscape album. I don't know if he'll ever do it, but I would love to hear more Witherscape because this is a great project. So yeah, check him out. And now we'll conclude yet another update for you guys. Like I said earlier, I am currently working on another stack that's starting to get big, and it's going to be mostly compiled of 2 band discographies that I've managed to complete. So that'll be fun. Plus some extra stuff that will be... I actually got quite a few on the way as we speak. But that'll be then. But anyways, what was your favorite album out of everything I showed off in this update? Let me know in the comments below. And until next time, keep your horns high and your dreams wet.